Jake here for American Trucks, and today I am taking a look at this MotoFab 2-inch front leveling kit for 2006 and newer 4-wheel drive Ram 1500s without air ride, excluding the Mega Cab. If you're planning on adding some larger wheels and tires, or even if you just want to eliminate the rake from your Ram 1500 and you want to keep that factory ride quality, a kit like this one from MotoFab is going to be just the ticket. Before we get into the nitty-gritty though, I would like to reiterate that this kit is not compatible with Mega Cab models or those that have factory air ride. Now, as you can see from our truck here, 33s fit on without an issue. However, if you do try to go to 35s, you're going to run into some problems with rubbing and clearance. So for that reason, I would definitely recommend sticking with the 33s. Rams do come from the factory with a bit of rake to them. And if you're not familiar with the term, rake refers to the angle at which a vehicle sits. So if you're looking at the truck from the side, you'll notice that the front end tends to sit a little bit lower than the rear. Now that's kind of cool if you like that old school muscle car look, but if you're doing any kind of off-roading, or if you want to add more clearance for those larger wheels and tires, or even just want it to sit level without going whole hog on a lift kit, something like this is going to be the right kind of option for you. So what we're looking at here is essentially just a pair of spacers. Now these are going to insert at the top of your front struts, and they're going to add a total of 2 inches of lift to your front suspension, and that will end up leveling out the stance of your truck. It's important to note here though that spacer lifts are not a 1-to-1 ratio. That is to say, if you're looking for something like a 2-inch lift like this, you don't necessarily need the spacers to be a full 2 inches. As you can see, these spacers measure 1¼ inches. And the reason for that has to do with the suspension geometry. With the way everything is mounted and set up in the front end of your truck, all you're going to need is this 1¼ inch spacer to get that full 2 inches of lift. Now these are a simple thing, but it's really important that they're done right. These ones from MotoFab are made from CNC-machined billet aluminum, so this all starts as one solid piece. And they've been finished in this nice textured black powder coat to help keep everything protected from rust and corrosion. So unlike polyurethane spacers or metal ones that might be welded together, these are all one piece and they're much less likely to wear out, and they're going to stand up better to abuse. That's also good news if you plan to take your truck off-road. Raising that front end will result in a better approach angle and better overall ground clearance. Now, it might not be a whole lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it is going to make a difference. And again, if you're looking to fit a larger wheel and tire setup, this leveling kit is going to help you out there too. Again, raising that front end just a little bit can help avoid rubbing and clearance issues when you get to larger diameter wheels and tires. So if you're not looking to raise your truck too high, but you still want a beefier setup, then something like this is going to be of interest to you. As far as pricing is concerned, this is going to come in at just about $100, which I think is pretty good value. Anything that adds a functional element to your vehicle for $100 or less is well worth it in my opinion. And these are going to make an improvement to the look and the capability of your truck without much sacrifice. They're also a really high quality product. About the only thing you're going to need to sacrifice, in fact, is some time. Coming in at a 2 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, this is a job that you can definitely accomplish at home, and you should figure on it taking you around 2 hours to do it. It is going to require moving some bits out of the wheel well to gain access to the front struts, which you do have to drop, but it is overall not a hard process. Just remember that once you've got everything bolted back together, you should plan on getting an alignment done because you are changing around the suspension geometry. And everything you need to get this done also comes in the box, including new studs and new nuts for the top of the struts. I went ahead and put these into this spacer to give you an idea of how it's going to look when you go to bolt it in. But enough talking about it, let's head over to the install bay now and we'll show you how to get these installed on your Ram.
Tools required for this install include an impact gun, a ratchet, a hammer, a 21mm wrench, a 17mm ratcheting wrench, a 15/16 wrench, a pry bar, an 8mm Allen, a 10, 16, 17, 18, 21, and 22mm sockets, a couple bungee cords, as well as a jack and a couple jack stands. What's up guys? Today we're going to be installing a leveling kit on our Ram 1500, so let's get right to it. So first things first guys, after we get the truck up in the air, we have to remove our front wheels. So we'll take a 22mm socket and our locking lug nut key and take our wheels off. And now we can do that same thing on the other side. So now once we have our wheel removed and access to our fender well, we're gonna go ahead and disconnect this ABS line. There's a clip that holds it into our brake line. So you can pull on that, open that clip, and pop right out. And then we can follow our line up, and there's another connection here on the upper control arm that we can wiggle free. So now that we have our first two clips disconnected, we can follow our ABS line down, and it's clipped into the spindle as well. So we can just pull this one right out. So our next step is going to be to remove our tie rod end. So it's going to be a 21mm nut here. We can get a 21mm socket for, and then we can take a hammer right here to this piece to free up our ball joint. Leave that nut threaded on just a couple threads until we hit it out. And then we can fully remove our nut and disconnect our tie rod. So now we can come to our lower strut bolt. This is going to be a 21mm, and there's also a 15/16 nut on the back. So we'll get a 15/16 wrench on the back side. And then we can get our 21mm socket and get this bolt out. So then we can run out this bolt with our 21mm gun. If that doesn't work, we can jack up on the bottom of the spindle, and it'll give us that clearance to get it out. So now with our hub jacked up, we can go ahead and wiggle out our bolt. And this one's still a little stuck, so I'm gonna give it one more tap with the gun. So our next step is gonna be to disconnect our sway bar end link from our lower control arm. So it's gonna be right at the bottom here. It's an 18mm nut. So we can get an 18mm socket on that and remove it. So once we have our sway bar end link disconnected, our next step is going to be to disconnect our upper control arm from our spindle. So it's held on by a 21mm nut. But as soon as we disconnect that nut, our whole spindle is going to be able to fall down. So we want to support that weight with a jack stand. And then our whole hub is able to slide side to side right now. So I'm going to go ahead and take our tie rod, slide it back into place, and just put our nut on a couple threads. Now with everything held into position, we can go ahead and disconnect our nut. So now we can get in there with a 21mm ratcheting wrench. And we're gonna leave our nut threaded on a couple threads so that we can get in there with a hammer. We're gonna hit the side of the spindle so that our ball joint releases. So now we can take our hammer and give the top of our spindle a couple taps. Now we can take out our tie rod end again. So now we can go ahead and fully remove the nut that's holding our upper control arm to our spindle. Now a very common thing with ball joints is the whole stud likes to spin when you go to remove the nut. So we can get our 21mm ratcheting wrench on top and a 10mm socket on the bottom, and that'll make sure our stud doesn't spin. So we've gone ahead and put a bungee cord onto our spindle just to better hold it into place while we remove our strut. So then we can come up to the top, and we have 3 16mm nuts that we can get a 16mm ratcheting wrench on and remove those. So now with our top nuts removed, we can go ahead and get a pry bar on our lower control arm. So now we're ready to assemble our spacer. So we have these Allen bolts that come in our kit. They're going to go through the threaded hole on the backside. And then I'm going to go ahead and use an 8mm Allen bit on an impact gun. You want to make sure to get these studs extra tight, otherwise when you're threading a nut on, it's just going to spin it out. So now we can install our spacer onto our strut assembly. So these holes are offset, so it's only one way it can go on, so you can't put it on sideways, backwards. And then we're going to thread on our factory 16mm nuts. And then I'll take a 16mm socket and snug these down. And now we can get this back on the truck. So now we're ready to install our strut back onto our truck. I've got some bungee cords just to hold the spindle into place so it doesn't fall down. So first we can slide our studs through our top. We'll put 1 or 2 nuts on top and then fish our lower mount into our lower control arm and get our bolt through. So now we can get a pry bar to get the bottom of our strut over our lower control arm, or you could get a buddy, have them push down on the hub here to lower our lower control arm, and we'll get it into place. Now with our strut in place, we can reinstall our lower strut bolt. So once again, I'm going to get in there with a pry bar to line up our holes. So if you can't get the bolt all the way through, you could jack up on the lower control arm, or you can get in there with a hammer and tap it the rest of the way through. So now with our bolt through our lower strut, we can go ahead and install our 15/16 nut on the backside. And then we'll get a 15/16 wrench on our nut side and a 21mm socket on our bolt head and tighten that down. So now we can install the rest of our nuts up top. And then we'll go ahead and use a 17mm ratcheting wrench to tighten these down. So now we're going to want to reconnect our upper control arm, but before we do that, we're going to have to jack up on the lower control arm to close this gap so we can get our nut on the backside. So I'm going to reinstall our tie rod, that way it holds the hub nice and secure. We can jack it up and then get our nut on our upper control arm. So we can get our tie rod into its spot and get our 21mm nut and thread it on the backside. Then I'll come in with my 21mm socket and tighten this up. Now we can get our knuckle into place, pinch down, and start our nut. So now we can get in here with a 21mm ratcheting wrench and tighten down our nut. So now we can go ahead and reinstall our 18mm nut on the bottom of our sway bar end link. And then we can come in with our 18mm socket and tighten that down. Now we can go ahead and reconnect our ABS line into our upper control arm. And then we'll clip it to our brake line as well. And now we can slide our last grommet into our S-clip behind our spindle. And now with that done, we can repeat that same process on the other side. So that'll wrap up this review and install of the MotoFab 2-inch front leveling kit for your 06 to current 4-wheel drive Ram 1500 without air ride and excluding the Mega Cab. Thank you for watching, and remember, for all things Ram, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.